Question: what is knowledge? So far, we've actually only looked at two theories to answer this question. One of them, of course, is Plato's JTB theory, justified true belief. And that seems to be pretty intuitive, but many students, when they first encounter Bacon's view, they kind of like that view. Knowledge is power theory, we'll call it for now. That's not really the name we're going to go with. But I like to separate Francis Bacon, the thinker, from this view. It's called pragmatism. And I like to separate these two, Bacon and pragmatism, because, well, multiple reasons. But one thing I'll say right now is that Bacon never called himself a pragmatist. Pragmatism, the way it is considered today, it certainly has roots in Bacon's views, but it has developed and been enriched and uses a different language than did Bacon. So I like to separate these a little bit, although there is, of course, some overlap and definitely some inspiration coming from Francis Bacon. So here's what pragmatism is. Pragmatism is the view that an individual has knowledge about a given subject if the agent, that individual, can successfully apply the information in practice. For example, a scientist has knowledge about solar eclipses if she can predict the next solar eclipse. Obviously, we've all run into people who claim they know something. Perhaps someone takes a class in college, and then you ask them, oh, what did you learn? What do you know? And they can't really say or do anything. I've met some people who claimed they knew how to fix cars. And when an opportunity came so that they can display their knowledge, they couldn't really do much of anything. If you can't really do anything with what you claim you know, is it really knowledge? This is why pragmatism is so appealing to people. Here, knowledge is equivalent to doing, to making, to controlling, might be another way of putting it. So this is a contender, I would say, to Plato's JTB theory. Now, this is extremely convenient for us because we looked at this here argument. This is the regress argument that we saw in lesson 1.2. And this argument happens to use the JTB theory during its argumentation. Just look at all the different cases where the word justified comes up. What Bacon, struggling against tradition, Aristotelian and otherwise, what Bacon was able to do here is to redefine knowledge so that these, what we might call pedantic knowledge games, so that these games are diffused in a sense. So once we redefine knowledge the way Bacon did, well, we can see that these premises, we just, again, look at all the places where the word justified comes up. If we redefine knowledge so that we diffuse each of these premises, now premise 1, 2, and 3 being essentially nullified because we're using a different definition, it turns out that now the conclusion, the subconclusion number 5 and the main conclusion number 7, those no longer follow. We took away their support 1 through 3. 4 still appears to be true, but 1 through 3, all the, not all of it, but much of the support for this view came from those 3 premises. And having changed the definition of knowledge, we have, one might say, successfully overcome the regress. So Bacon, for this reason, is considered kind of an important figure. I mean, obviously he also had a huge role in codifying the scientific method, but really his ideas began with just a struggling against a rejection of traditional conceptions of knowledge. So I'd like to kind of harp on this a little bit, I want to give you different ways of thinking about pragmatism. So I've given you a couple of different reformulations of the pragmatist doctrine. For example, knowledge is the ability to produce physical results. For example, the ability to control some part of the natural world. So this is a conception of pragmatism focused on physical results. Knowledge just is those beliefs that allow a person to do something. Same thing, right? Let me give you the counterfactual so you can kind of see it a different way. If you can't do anything with your beliefs, then they are not knowledge. So notice he is kind of limiting the kind of things we can call knowledge to things you can do things with. And maybe you think of knowledge in a more broad way. So that is one controversial aspect of pragmatism. But Bacon thought, I'll take that loss. Bacon, if you recall, was a utopian of sorts. He really thought that we could make life ideal, perfect for most of mankind, for all of mankind. So he was a utopian about this, and he thought we should use science to this end. So maybe it's okay to limit what we can know insofar as it will allow us to make a better world. Now, of course, there is a problem with this view, and it isn't just about limiting knowledge. Consider this. We can imagine a theory that has predictive power, in other words, the power to predict the occurrence of phenomena accurately, and explanatory power, in other words, the capacity to explain why phenomena occur in a certain way, yet it is still, in fact, inaccurate and wrong. I'll give you two examples: Ptolemy's geocentric model of the solar system and alchemy, which was, at a certain period, basically indistinguishable from chemistry. So, of course, we've been chatting about the Aristotelian universe, or the Aristotelian worldview, the Aristotelian jigsaw. And of course, Aristotle had his views, but they weren't quite yet a system of beliefs. They weren't at least a mathematical system. And so Ptolemy came around in the 2nd century of the Common Era, and he actually provided a mathematical model of the Aristotelian perspective of the solar system. By the way, at that time, the solar system was the whole universe, so Ptolemy's model here is really a model of the entire universe at the time. And it is complicated. It has epicycles and equant points and other things. But the important thing to note here is that it preserves some pretty fundamental aspects of the Aristotelian worldview. The Earth is there at the center, and the celestial bodies, everything that is above the moon, superlunar region, they move in perfect circles. And that is an important element of the Aristotelian worldview. So Ptolemy was able to give us this model. And what is amazing about this is that this had predictive power and explanatory power that was unrivaled for 1400 years. From the time that he provided this model until almost 1600, there was no better model, no better predictive model than Ptolemy's model. And that is astounding. So what we must realize here, though, is that this had all the predictive power you might want, let's just say in the 1500s, but you know it's wrong. You know it's inaccurate ultimately. Does that matter? It might not for a pragmatist. So now you have to decide for yourself. Pragmatism seems intuitively appealing at first, but are you okay with this? Do you want to call this knowledge, the Ptolemaic model, knowledge? you know how the universe works or the solar system works through this model? It's hard to say. In chemistry, things were a little messy for quite a long time, to be honest. Early chemists, for example, Robert Boyle, ascribed the fact that substances such as sulfur were easily set afire to the presence of a special substance called phlogiston. That's from the historian of mathematics, Morris Klein. Now, if you've never heard of phlogiston, that's okay because it doesn't exist. But in early chemical theories of chemical physics, this was an essential component, and that actually had some predictive power insofar as their theories went. Do you want to call that knowledge, though? That they use this thing that's completely made up, doesn't exist at all, but it worked. Is that enough to call it knowledge? It's tough, and this gets us into theories of justification. I want to give you two theories. Not that these are perfect camps. There is sometimes many competing little camps within these bigger camps, but I'm going to give you two general camps, even if they're not all very uniform. So there is a correspondence theory of truth, generally speaking. And in a correspondence theory of truth, what makes a true belief true is that the belief corresponds to reality. If I say something like, the cat is on the mat, well, what makes that true is that there's a cat on a mat. That's essentially what this theory says. Now, again, there are different camps within this greater camp, but they all have that in common at least. Here's an alternative. A coherence theory of truth is more so like the worldviews we've been talking about. In a coherence theory of truth, what makes a true belief true is that the belief coheres with or ties in with other beliefs. If you want to think about this like a web, there are central beliefs in the web, and you accept a new belief if it fits in with your existing web of beliefs. And that's how you justify it. Why should you accept this fact that you learned from this book? Well, you believe in books published by academic university presses in general, and this book is from a university press. On top of that, this book was recommended by a reliable professor, and it's one of your beliefs that professors tend to, in general, not lie or make things up. They usually cite their references. So given this web of beliefs and this new fact that you learned from a book which in general also fits in with your web of beliefs, you accept this new belief as true. It ties in with your other beliefs. It is a puzzle piece, to put it one more way, that fits in with the rest of your jigsaw. So that's a coherence theory of truth. Again, there's actually different camps within this greater branch or this greater camp. But in general, they all have that in common. I like to kind of explain a coherence theory of truth in one other way, though, just to make this a little more intuitive. And besides, we are covering pragmatism today, so I want to emphasize this a little bit. In a way, all of you already believe, at least partially, in a coherence theory of truth. Take a look here at this moving image. Let's imagine that each of these little connections, these are actually references. And this spotlight that we have moving around, that is an argument that you're trying to make. When you're making an argument, what you're essentially saying is you're pointing out different things that people already believe in. Those are those little nodes in the back. And you're showing how they're all connected. And you're saying, if you accept all these things, you should accept my conclusion as well. Maybe an even better way of putting this is when you're writing a research essay. Let's just say that those little nodes in the back, those are all your references. And what you do in an essay, which in this case is actually the spotlight that's being shown around, what you do in an essay is show those connections between the references. Those are those little interconnections between the nodes. And what you're really doing is saying, well, if you believe in all these references, and you should because they are academic references, you should also believe my thesis. That's essentially what you're doing in a research essay, trying to prove some conclusion, whether it be in psychology or sociology or whatever. So the idea here is you sort of already believe in the coherence the coherence theory of truth. If you've ever written a persuasive essay or an argumentative essay or a research essay, that's sort of the justification that you're using in those types of essays. So this probably should fit in with your worldview pretty well. Now that we've made explicit those theories of truth, we can make some connections to our views that we've covered so far. Pragmatists often take a coherentist approach to justification. Relatedly, pragmatists often see the goal of science with an instrumental attitude, meaning that the goal of science is to have theories with predictive power and which explain the available data. So the pragmatists are definitely okay with coherentism. They just said, look, I'll accept a view into my web of beliefs as long as it has predictive power, right? So this is kind of a general methodology that they have about how to accept beliefs. They should have predictive power. They should be able to explain things. They should fit with my existing worldview. And, well, to be honest, this is a very modern attitude, maybe a very scientific attitude. You can tell from Francis Bacon's writings that he really was displeased with some of the ancients' attitude about justifying their beliefs. They focused more so on having pleasing theories for the philosophers rather than actually getting things done. So the pragmatist likes to get things done. They say, look, our scientific theories should have predictive power. They should cohere. They should all fit in together. And that's enough for them. Now, that should be a key or a clue as to what the problem or the objection to this view sometimes is. It's good enough. It's true enough. Here is where you might see the pragmatists in a different light. An advocate of the correspondence theory of truth is more likely to take a realist attitude with regards to the goal of science, meaning that the goal of science is to have theories with predictive power which explain the available data and that these actually describe what reality really is like. Once you are familiar with the realist attitude, that is when some people begin to have a problem with pragmatism. The pragmatists see science as a tool. Let's just make things happen. But some people are, should we say, more aspiring about science. They say our scientific theories, of course, should have predictive power and explanatory power. But they better also actually correspond to reality. The pragmatists don't feel bound to that view. They just say, no, as long as it has predictive power, that's good enough. That's true enough. And so with that distinction made, maybe now some of you are reconsidering whether or not you like pragmatism. So, a pragmatist would say, this model right here, that's true enough. Are you comfortable with that? Okay, just to make sure that we really do have a grasp on what pragmatism is, I'm going to give you the informal fallacy of the day now. And I need to make sure that you know that the pragmatists are not making this fallacious argument. But sometimes people do, so I want to make sure to clarify that now. But first, let me actually tell you what this fallacy is. The improper appeal to ignorance, that's today's informal fallacy. This is a fallacy in which an arguer lends support to his or her conclusion by claiming that his or her view is true since it has not yet been proven false. Now, this is unfortunately more common than it should be. And I'll just give you a funny example. The Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, I think you've heard of them. Hopefully you've heard of them. They are actually around and they are being given religious liberties. As you can tell, some people are demanding that they are allowed to take their pictures wearing a spaghetti strainer on their head, which is their custom in this religion. In any case, in their Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which I was gifted one year, I think almost as a joke, they say in there, you haven't yet proven that God isn't a flying spaghetti monster. As such, God is a flying spaghetti monster. That, of course, is an improper appeal to ignorance. That's not at all how reason works, how argumentation works, but some people really do this, perhaps accidentally, probably accidentally. In this case, they're doing it satirically. But some people really do this on accident, or worse, maybe they do it for profit. I don't know what's going on with the History Channel, but shows like Ancient Aliens, which make the assumption, well, we can't prove it's not aliens, so let's talk about aliens for an hour. I'm not sure that that's very unlike the improper appeal to ignorance. Here it is in standard form. You haven't proved me wrong, therefore I am right. Even the greatest philosopher known to mankind, Shakira, knows that that is not the right way to reason. So now that you are familiar with that informal fallacy, I want to make sure that we stress this. Right? Pragmatists aren't saying that their view is definitively true. The way they're defining true in a way is just a little bit weaker than the JTB theory view of truth. They're just saying it's true enough for now. It's the best we have right now. Pragmatists readily acknowledge that further empirical research may require them to update their beliefs. So, a much weaker notion of truth the pragmatists hold. I have here some quotes from some people that are pretty clearly pragmatists. I began this lesson with this quote, "No fact is safe from the next generation of scientists with the next generation of tools." Clearly showing that, look, what we consider facts today, that will change, and we have to be okay with that. Certainly a weaker notion of truth than maybe Plato had. And one more from John Doris. "As I've said it, I stand refutable. My thesis is empirically committed and is therefore falsifiable by empirical developments." There they are, readily acknowledging that you can prove them wrong, and they are ready to be proved wrong, as long as the empirical developments demonstrate this. So that is the pragmatist spirit, a whole other approach to worldviews, a weaker sense of truth, a coherentist approach to justification, and an instrumentalist perspective or attitude on science. Maybe that's good enough? We'll see.